I stood at the main electrical panel, my hand hovering over the emergency shutdown switch as two security guards waited to escort me out. The factory floor hummed beneath us with million-dollar machinery that would soon become useless metal sculptures. I looked directly at Marcus, the cocky heir who had just destroyed my life, with a smug grin. You have 20 minutes before the smelters solidify. That's a $55 million repair. Good luck. 10 years of loyalty, expertise, and dedication had been reduced to this single moment of ultimate betrayal. My finger moved toward the switch. 10 years earlier, I walked into Meridian Steel manufacturing as a fresh engineering graduate named Gwen, clutching my resume and hoping desperately for my first real job. The unemployment rate was climbing, and I had been rejected from 12 companies already. When Harold Meridian himself agreed to interview me personally, I knew this was my chance. Harold was nothing like what I expected from a factory owner. He wore simple work clothes, his hands were calloused from decades of labor, and his office was filled with technical manuals instead of expensive art. He built Meridian Steel from a small welding shop into one of the region's largest steel manufacturers, and every employee seemed to genuinely respect him. "Tell me about electrical systems, Gwen," he said, leaning back in his worn leather chair. "What do you know about industrial power management?" I explained my coursework, my internships, my understanding of load balancing and voltage regulation. Harold listened intently occasionally, nodding or asking follow-up questions that revealed his own deep technical knowledge. "This job isn't just about engineering," he said finally. "Our power grid controls 3 massive smelting furnaces that operate at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. We're talking about precise temperature controls, backup generators, load distribution systems. One mistake could shut down production for days, or worse, hurt someone. Are you ready for that responsibility?" The weight of his words hit me immediately, but instead of fear, I felt excited. This was exactly the kind of challenge I had dreamed about during 4 years of theoretical study. My first week was overwhelming. Harold walked me through the entire facility, personally explaining the intricate electrical systems that powered everything from the massive furnaces to the smallest conveyor belts. The power grid was like a living organism with its own rhythm and personality. 3 main smelting furnaces dominated the factory floor, each requiring precisely controlled electrical input to maintain the extreme temperatures needed for steel production. "See that panel over there?" Harold pointed to a wall of switches, gauges, and monitoring equipment. "That's the heart of everything. Those switches control power distribution to every major system in this building. The red ones are emergency shutoffs. The blue ones regulate furnace temperatures, and the green ones manage backup power from our generators." I absorbed every detail like a sponge. Harold introduced me to the veteran workers who would become my colleagues and mentors. Frank was the head electrician, a gruff man in his 50s who had worked alongside Harold for 20 years. Dorothy supervised the factory floor with the authority of someone who understood every process intimately. Carl managed maintenance with an encyclopedic knowledge of every machine in the building. These weren't just employees to Harold. They were family. He knew their children's names, attended their weddings, and genuinely cared about their well-being. The company culture was built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "This isn't just about electricity," Harold told me during my second week. "It's about people's livelihoods. Every person in this building depends on us keeping these systems running safely and efficiently. When you make decisions about power management, remember that you're protecting their ability to feed their families." His words resonated deeply with me. This wasn't just a job. It was a responsibility to an entire community of workers who had dedicated their lives to building something meaningful. My first major test came during my 3rd week, when a severe thunderstorm knocked out city power during the evening shift. Emergency protocols required immediate activation of backup generators, to prevent catastrophic cooling of the molten steel in the furnaces. I was the only electrical specialist on duty, and 300 workers were counting on me to keep production running. My hands shook as I initiated the generator startup sequence, but my training kicked in. I systematically transferred power loads from the main grid to backup systems, carefully monitoring voltage levels and temperature controls. The transition was seamless, and production continued without interruption. Harold found me in the control room hours later, exhausted but proud of handling my first real crisis. Instead of simply acknowledging my success, he sat down and reviewed every decision I had made, helping me understand how to improve my response time and efficiency. "You did well tonight, Gwen," he said. "But more importantly, you stayed calm under pressure and put safety first. That's the kind of judgment I look for in someone I can trust with this responsibility." Over the following months, I threw myself into learning every aspect of the electrical systems. I studied manufacturer manuals, attended training seminars, and spent countless hours with Frank learning the practical nuances that textbooks never teach. Harold encouraged my development, often staying late to discuss complex technical problems or share his own experiences from the early days of building the company. I discovered that I had a natural talent for understanding the relationship between electrical systems and steel production processes. Small adjustments in power distribution could improve efficiency, reduce waste, and save thousands of dollars in energy costs. Harold gave me freedom to experiment and implement improvements, trusting my judgment, even when my ideas seemed unconventional. The work was demanding, but incredibly fulfilling. I felt like I was contributing something meaningful, protecting both the company's success and the livelihoods of hundreds of families. Harold's leadership created an environment where everyone felt valued and motivated to do their best work. During quiet moments in the control room, Harold would sometimes share stories about building the company from nothing. He talked about the early struggles, the risk of losing everything, the satisfaction of providing good jobs for people in the community. His passion for the business was infectious, and I found myself developing the same deep commitment to excellence and integrity. Everything changed during my 11th month when Harold called me into his office with an unusually serious expression. He closed the door carefully and gestured for me to sit down. "Gwen, I need to share something with you that I haven't told anyone else yet." He began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. The doctors say I have several good years left, but I need to start planning for the future of this company." The news hit me like a physical blow. Harold had become more than just my boss. He was my mentor, my role model, and the foundation of everything I believed about ethical business leadership. "My son Marcus will inherit the company eventually," Harold continued. "He's got an MBA from a prestigious university, but I'm worried about his understanding of our culture here. He sees dollar signs where I see people. I'm going to need your help protecting what we've built together." As I walked home that evening, Harold's words echoed in my mind. The foundation of my professional world was beginning to shift, and I sensed that challenging times lay ahead. But I was determined to honor Harold's trust and protect the values that made Meridian Steel more than just a business. The next 4 years became the most fulfilling period of my career as I gradually evolved into the backbone of Meridian Steel's operations. Harold's condition progressed slowly, allowing him to maintain leadership while increasingly relying on my technical expertise and judgment. Every day brought new challenges that deepened my understanding of industrial power management and strengthened my confidence as a professional. My crisis management skills were tested repeatedly during those years. When a power surge from the municipal grid threatened to damage sensitive equipment, I quickly isolated our systems and switched to backup generators, preventing hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential damage. During a blizzard that knocked out power across 3 counties, I managed our energy resources so efficiently that we became the only major manufacturer in the region to maintain full production. Each successful intervention built my reputation among the workforce and proved my value to the company. Harold often praised my quick thinking and thorough preparation, telling other business leaders that I was the best investment he had ever made. His confidence in my abilities was deeply gratifying and motivated me to pursue even higher standards of excellence. I implemented several cost-saving electrical efficiency programs that reduced our energy consumption by 15%, while actually improving production quality. By optimizing load distribution and upgrading aging equipment strategically, I saved the company over $200,000 annually in utility costs. Harold was so impressed with these results that he gave me a substantial raise and expanded my authority over all electrical systems. Training new electrical apprentices became another important responsibility. I developed comprehensive training programs that combined theoretical knowledge with practical experience, ensuring that incoming workers understood both the technical aspects and the safety culture that Harold had established. Watching young technicians grow under my guidance reminded me of my own early days learning from Frank and Dorothy, and I took pride in continuing that tradition of mentorship. Harold's gradual decline was heartbreaking to witness. He began forgetting conversations we had just finished, repeating himself during meetings, and occasionally getting confused about current projects. However, he retained his fundamental values and his trust in my judgment. During his more difficult days, I effectively ran the entire electrical operation while maintaining the illusion that he was still in charge to preserve his dignity. Marcus visited the factory occasionally during this period, but his interest seemed limited to reviewing profit margins and questioning expenses. He showed no curiosity about the technical operations or the relationships that made the company function effectively. When I tried to explain complex electrical systems or safety protocols, his eyes would glaze over with boredom. He clearly viewed the business as a financial asset, rather than a community of people working together toward common goals. The contrast between father and son was stark and troubling. Where Harold saw people, Marcus saw numbers. Where Harold valued expertise and experience, Marcus focused on cutting costs and maximizing short-term profits. During family gatherings at the factory, I watched Harold try to engage his son in meaningful discussions about business philosophy and responsibility to employees, but Marcus seemed impatient with what he considered old-fashioned sentimentality. My personal life during this period revolved entirely around the factory. I worked holidays when necessary, missed family gatherings to handle emergencies, and spent weekends studying technical manuals to stay current with industry developments. Some friends questioned my dedication, suggesting that I was sacrificing too much for a job that might not appreciate my efforts. But they didn't understand the deep satisfaction I found in protecting something meaningful and contributing to the success of a company that treated people with dignity. The veteran workers who had welcomed me as a nervous graduate now looked to me for leadership and guidance. Frank relied on my electrical expertise to plan maintenance schedules. Dorothy consulted with me about power requirements for new production lines. Carl coordinated equipment upgrades through my technical recommendations. I had become an integral part of the family that Harold had spent decades building. Harold's occasional lucid moments became precious opportunities for meaningful conversations about the future. During these clear periods, he would express gratitude for my dedication and concern about what would happen to the company after his retirement. He worried that Marcus didn't understand the human cost of poor business decisions and the responsibility that came with employing hundreds of families. "Promise me you'll try to protect what we've built here," he said during one particularly emotional conversation. "These people have given their lives to this company, and they deserve better than being treated like disposable resources." I promised to do everything in my power to preserve the culture of respect and integrity that defined Meridian Steel. At the time, I believed that my expertise and proven track record would be enough to influence Marcus toward better decisions. I naively assumed that competence and dedication would be valued regardless of who held ultimate authority. The company thrived during these years under the combination of Harold's wisdom and my technical leadership. Production efficiency reached record levels, safety incidents decreased significantly, and employee satisfaction remained high, despite the uncertainty surrounding Harold's condition. We were proof that treating people well and maintaining high technical standards was not only morally right, but also economically successful. Warning signs of coming changes began to appear during the fourth year as Harold's condition deteriorated more rapidly. Marcus started visiting more frequently, always accompanied by expensively dressed consultants who took notes and asked pointed questions about operational costs. These consultants seemed particularly interested in salary expenses and questioned whether certain positions were necessary for efficient operations. When Harold suffered a mild stroke that affected his speech and memory more severely, Marcus immediately called a family meeting to discuss transferring legal control of the company. Harold's doctors recommended reducing his stress and responsibilities, which gave Marcus the opening he had been waiting for to implement his vision for modernizing the business. During the last meeting I attended with Harold as the official leader, he pulled me aside afterward with tears in his eyes. "I'm scared for these people, Gwen," he whispered. "Marcus doesn't understand what it means to be responsible for so many families. Please don't let him destroy what we've worked so hard to build." I assured him that I would protect both the technical integrity of our operations and the welfare of our employees. I believed that my proven record of success and deep understanding of the business would make me indispensable regardless of ownership changes. I was confident that logic and competence would prevail over any short-sighted cost-cutting impulses. As Harold's influence waned and Marcus's authority grew, I prepared myself to defend the values and standards that had made Meridian Steel successful. I documented every process safety protocol and efficiency improvement to demonstrate the value of experienced leadership. I was ready to fight for the people who had become my second family and the work that had become my passion. Marcus wasted no time implementing his vision for modernizing Meridian Steel once he gained full legal control. His first major decision was hiring Tyler Matthews, his former MBA classmate, as an efficiency consultant, with a mandate to identify cost-saving opportunities throughout the organization. Tyler arrived wearing expensive suits and carrying spreadsheets that reduced decades of institutional knowledge to simple numerical equations. Tyler had never worked in manufacturing and possessed no understanding of industrial electrical systems, but he approached every conversation with the confidence of someone who believed that business principles were universally applicable regardless of industry specifics. His first week involved interviewing department heads to identify what he called redundancies and inefficiencies in our operational structure. When Tyler reached my department, he questioned every procedure I had developed over nearly 7 years of experience. Why did we need backup generators when the municipal power grid was reliable? Why did we perform daily safety inspections when equipment failures were rare? Why did we maintain detailed documentation when computer systems could automate most monitoring functions? I patiently explained the critical importance of redundant safety systems in high-temperature industrial operations. A single power failure during active smelting could result in catastrophic equipment damage and serious safety hazards. The backup generators weren't just insurance. They were essential protection for both human lives and millions of dollars in equipment and materials. Tyler listened politely while typing notes on his laptop. but his questions revealed fundamental misconceptions about the complexity of industrial power management. He seemed to view our safety protocols as bureaucratic obstacles to efficiency rather than carefully developed protections against genuine dangers. The first round of layoffs came 6 weeks after Tyler's arrival. Marcus announced that 37 positions would be eliminated to streamline operations and improve competitiveness. Most of the terminated employees were veteran workers with 20 to 30 years of experience, including several electricians and maintenance technicians whose expertise was irreplaceable. Frank, the head electrician who had mentored me during my early years, was among those selected for termination. His salary was higher than younger workers, and Tyler's analysis showed that his responsibilities could be distributed among less expensive personnel. When I protested that Frank's institutional knowledge was invaluable for preventing problems before they occurred, Marcus dismissed my concerns as emotional attachment to outdated practices. "We need to run this company based on data, not sentiment," Marcus explained. "Tyler's analysis shows that we can maintain the same production levels with a smaller, more efficient workforce." I was forced to train Frank's replacements, 2 recent technical school graduates who possessed basic electrical knowledge but lacked any understanding of the specific quirks and personalities of our aging equipment. They were eager and hardworking, but they didn't recognize the subtle warning signs that prevented minor issues from becoming major problems. Harold had been placed in a memory care facility by this point, and Marcus held complete legal authority over all company decisions. I wrote detailed reports about the risks created by eliminating experienced personnel, but my warnings were dismissed as resistance to necessary changes. Tyler characterized my concerns as fear-mongering designed to protect my own position rather than genuine safety considerations. Marcus cut the maintenance budget by 40% and deferred essential electrical upgrades that I had recommended for improving both safety and efficiency. Equipment that should have been replaced continued operating beyond its recommended lifespan, creating increasing risks of unexpected failures. I documented these risks meticulously, but my reports seemed to disappear into Tyler's files without any meaningful response. The company culture shifted dramatically as Marcus implemented what he called professional management practices. The family atmosphere that Harold had cultivated was replaced by corporate policies that treated employees as interchangeable resources rather than valued individuals. Employee satisfaction surveys were eliminated as unnecessary expenses, and the annual company picnic was canceled to reduce overhead costs. Near-miss incidents began occurring more frequently as the inexperienced workforce struggled with equipment they didn't fully understand. A junior electrician nearly electrocuted himself while attempting a repair that Frank would have handled routinely. Another new hire caused a minor explosion by incorrectly wiring a control panel, resulting in production delays and equipment damage. Each incident reinforced my warnings about the dangers of eliminating experienced personnel, but Marcus and Tyler attributed these problems to inadequate training rather than fundamental staffing issues. They hired an outside training company to conduct safety seminars, missing the point that expertise came from years of hands-on experience with specific equipment and systems. I found myself working increasingly long hours to compensate for the reduced and undertrained workforce. Problems that previously would have been caught early now escalated into emergency situations that required my direct intervention. My stress levels climbed as I tried to maintain safety standards while managing a department that was perpetually understaffed and inexperienced. Marcus brought in outside contractors for electrical work that my department had always handled internally. These contractors charged premium rates for services that cost us significantly less when performed by our own people, but Tyler's accounting methods classified contracted work as variable expenses rather than fixed labor costs, making the numbers appear more favorable on quarterly reports. My expertise and recommendations were increasingly ignored in favor of outside consultants who provided advice that aligned with Marcus's preconceived notions about modern business practices. When I objected to dangerous cost-cutting measures, I was told that my thinking was outdated and that I needed to adapt to contemporary management methods. The breaking point came during my 9th year, when a major electrical malfunction nearly caused a catastrophic furnace failure that could have killed several workers and destroyed millions of dollars in equipment. I was conducting routine maintenance when I noticed irregular voltage readings that indicated imminent failure of a critical transformer. My immediate response prevented disaster, but the root cause was deferred maintenance that I had warned about repeatedly. Instead of acknowledging that my expertise had prevented catastrophe, Marcus blamed me for the aging equipment that had caused the problem. During a heated meeting in his office, he accused me of creating unnecessary drama to justify my department's expenses and suggested that proper preventive maintenance would have eliminated the risk entirely. Maybe if you spent less time complaining about our decisions and more time doing your job properly, these problems wouldn't occur, Marcus said with barely controlled anger. I was stunned by his response. For nearly a decade, I had dedicated my professional life to protecting this company and its employees. Every recommendation I made was based on genuine safety concerns and proven technical principles. To be blamed for problems that resulted directly from ignoring my warnings felt like a betrayal of everything I had worked to accomplish. Tyler supported Marcus's position, suggesting that the incident demonstrated the need for more systematic approaches to equipment management. He proposed hiring a consulting firm to evaluate our entire electrical infrastructure and recommend modernization strategies that would eliminate dependence on what he called specialized personnel. That evening, I called Harold's memory care facility and spoke briefly with him during one of his clearer moments. He didn't remember many details about current events, but he understood that I was troubled about something at the company. "Trust your knowledge, Gwen," he said softly. "You know what's right. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." His words provided some comfort, but I realized that the values-driven leadership that had attracted me to Meridian Steel had been replaced by a purely profit-focused approach that saw people like me as obstacles rather than assets. Marcus was preparing to eliminate me, and there was nothing I could do to prevent what was coming. The final blow came on a cold Tuesday morning in February during my 10th year at Meridian Steel. Marcus summoned me to his office with an email marked urgent and requested that I bring all my current project files and departmental documentation. The formal tone was unusual, and I sensed immediately that something significant was about to happen. I arrived to find Marcus seated behind his father's old desk, which he had redecorated with expensive modern furniture and abstract art that reflected his personal taste rather than the company's industrial character. Tyler sat to his right with a laptop open and a stack of printed reports, while Linda Morrison from Human Resources occupied a chair near the window with her own folder of documents. "Gwen, please sit down," Marcus said without making eye contact. "We need to discuss some changes in your role here at Meridian Steel." The word changes immediately triggered my defensive instincts, but I maintained professional composure as I took the offered chair. Linda's presence confirmed my worst suspicions, since HR representatives only attended meetings that involved disciplinary actions or terminations. "After extensive analysis of our operational structure and staffing needs," Marcus continued reading from prepared remarks, "we've decided to restructure the electrical department to better align with current industry standards and cost management objectives." Tyler opened his laptop and began presenting a slideshow that reduced my decade of dedicated service to a series of budget projections and efficiency metrics. According to his analysis, my position was overstaffed and overpaid compared to industry benchmarks. He claimed that modern electrical systems required less specialized oversight and that most of my responsibilities could be automated or distributed among lower-level technicians. We've hired a new electrical systems manager who brings fresh perspectives and contemporary training to the position, Tyler announced. She'll be implementing streamlined procedures that will improve both efficiency and cost-effectiveness. My replacement, he explained, was Ashley Wilson, a recent graduate from a respected engineering program who had impressed them during interviews with her knowledge of modern automation systems and her willingness to work for significantly less than my current salary. She would start immediately and would expect my full cooperation during the transition period. The calculated cruelty of this announcement was devastating. Not only was I being terminated, but I was expected to train my replacement while preparing for my own departure. Marcus and Tyler seemed to view this as a reasonable request, rather than a humiliating insult to my professional dignity. This decision is purely business, Marcus said, finally making eye contact. Your salary represents a significant expense that we can no longer justify given current market conditions. Ashley will provide the same technical capabilities at a much more competitive rate. I found my voice and attempted to defend my record of service. I reminded them of the countless crises I had managed successfully, the cost-saving improvements I had implemented, and the safety record that was among the best in the industry. I pointed out that my institutional knowledge of our specific systems and equipment was irreplaceable, and that training someone else would take years. Tyler dismissed my arguments with the confidence of someone who had never actually performed the work he was analyzing. Modern electrical systems are standardized and well documented, he said. Any competent engineer can learn the necessary procedures in a matter of weeks with proper training materials. Marcus became increasingly impatient with my attempts to defend myself. Gwen, you need to accept that the industry has moved beyond the old ways of doing things. You're still thinking like it's 10 years ago, but we need to compete in today's marketplace. When I mentioned Harold and the values he had established for treating employees with respect, Marcus's expression hardened with anger. My father built this company, but he also nearly bankrupted it with his sentimental approach to business management. I'm not going to let his emotional decisions destroy what he worked so hard to create. The personal attack on Harold was the cruelest cut of all. Marcus was not only betraying my loyalty and service, but also dishonoring his father's memory and the principles that had made Meridian Steel successful. I realized that there was no point in continuing the conversation since his mind was already made up. Linda handed me a severance package that included 2 weeks of pay and information about continuing health insurance through Cobra. She also provided a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from discussing company operations or criticizing management decisions in exchange for the modest severance benefits. Security guards were waiting outside Marcus's office to escort me through the building as I collected my personal belongings. The humiliation was designed to send a message to other employees about the consequences of challenging management decisions. Workers who had been my colleagues and friends for nearly a decade watched helplessly as I was paraded through the facility like a criminal. My replacement was already in the electrical control room, confidently examining systems she clearly didn't understand while making notes about improvements she planned to implement. Ashley was young, enthusiastic, and completely unaware of the complexity she was inheriting. When I tried to explain critical safety procedures, she listened politely but seemed more interested in discussing her plans for modernizing what she called outdated protocols. Don't worry about me, Ashley said cheerfully. I'm sure I can figure out anything I need to know. These old systems are pretty straightforward once you understand the basic principles. Her dismissive confidence was both frustrating and frightening. I knew that her ignorance would eventually create dangerous situations, but there was nothing I could do to prevent what was coming. Marcus had made his decision, and Ashley was too inexperienced to recognize her own limitations. As security guards waited to escort me out, I overheard Marcus talking on his phone in the hallway outside his office. He was speaking to someone about quarterly profit projections and seemed excited about the cost savings from my termination. "We finally got rid of the old dinosaur who thought she was irreplaceable," he laughed. "Tyler's analysis was right on target. We're going to show a significant improvement in labor costs this quarter, and the new girl is eager to prove herself. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions to move a company forward." His words revealed the complete lack of respect or appreciation for my contributions. To Marcus, I was nothing more than an expensive line item that had finally been eliminated. The decade I had devoted to protecting his company and its employees meant nothing to him beyond the inconvenience of having to pay my salary. Walking through the factory floor for the last time, I saw the faces of workers who understood the injustice of what was happening but were powerless to intervene. They knew that challenging management decisions could result in their own terminations, so they offered sympathetic looks and quiet words of support, while carefully avoiding any actions that might be interpreted as insubordination. Frank had been gone for over a year, but Dorothy caught my eye near the main production line and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," while shaking her head in disgust. Carl was standing near the maintenance office with his arms crossed and a grim expression that conveyed his opinion of management's decision. These people had become my family, and leaving them behind felt like abandoning my responsibility to protect their safety and welfare. As I reached the main electrical panel for the final time, my hand instinctively moved toward the controls that I had operated thousands of times over the past decade. This panel was the heart of everything I had worked to protect and improve. Every switch and gauge held memories of crises averted, problems solved, and lives protected through careful attention to technical details that Marcus and Tyler would never understand or appreciate. The security guards were becoming impatient, but safety protocols required a final inspection of critical systems before my departure. As I performed this last official duty, I noticed that Ashley had already made a subtle but significant error in the power sequencing configuration. She had adjusted settings that would create a cascade failure in exactly 20 minutes, causing the very type of crisis that my experience was designed to prevent. For a moment, I considered pointing out her mistake and preventing the disaster that was about to unfold. But then I remembered Marcus's contempt for my expertise and his confidence that modern engineers could easily replace decades of experience. Perhaps it was time for them to learn exactly what they were losing when they eliminated people like me. I stood in the electrical control room with my hand hovering over the switches that controlled the entire factory's destiny. The security guards were positioned near the door, politely but firmly indicating that my time was up and I needed to leave immediately. Ashley was reviewing her notes about planned improvements, completely unaware that she had already set in motion a sequence of events that would devastate the company she thought she could manage better than me. 10 years of memories flooded through my consciousness as I gazed at the control panel that had been the center of my professional life. I remembered my first successful crisis response during the thunderstorm. Harold's proud smile when I prevented the power surge damage countless nights spent ensuring that hundreds of workers could return home safely to their families. This room had been my sanctuary, my command center, and the place where I had proven my worth countless times. The power sequencing error that Ashley had made was subtle but catastrophic. She had adjusted the load distribution settings in a way that would gradually destabilize the electrical grid over the next 20 minutes. The 3 massive smelting furnaces required precisely controlled power input to maintain the extreme temperatures necessary for steel production. Any significant interruption would cause the molten metal to begin cooling and solidifying, creating what we called a freeze, which would require weeks to repair and cost millions of dollars. Marcus appeared in the doorway, clearly impatient to complete my removal from the building. "Let's go, Gwen," he said with obvious annoyance. "We've been more than generous with the transition time, and Ashley needs to get started on her new responsibilities." Ashley looked up from her notes and smiled confidently. "Don't worry about me, Mr. Meridian. I've already identified several areas where we can streamline these processes and improve efficiency. Some of these old procedures seem unnecessarily complicated." Her words were like a knife in my heart. Those unnecessarily complicated procedures had been developed through years of experience and countless hours of careful analysis. Each protocol existed for specific safety and operational reasons that wouldn't be obvious to someone without extensive hands-on experience with these particular systems. Tyler appeared behind Marcus, consulting his tablet and looking satisfied with the progress of the transition. "The scheduling looks good for completing the handover today," he announced. "We should be able to show immediate cost savings starting next week." I performed one final scan of the monitoring equipment, noting the subtle indicators that suggested the developing crisis. Voltage irregularities were beginning to appear in Smelter Bay 2 exactly as I knew they would given Ashley's configuration changes. The temperature sensors showed minor fluctuations that would escalate rapidly once the power instability reached critical levels. Marcus checked his expensive watch and made an exasperated sound. "Come on, Gwen. This is taking too long. Just grab your stuff and let's finish this." The dismissive tone in his voice crystallized my decision. For 10 years, I had protected this company from disasters, both technical and financial. I had sacrificed personal relationships, missed family gatherings, and devoted my entire professional life to ensuring the success of Meridian Steel. My reward was public humiliation and replacement by someone who didn't even recognize her own dangerous mistakes. Harold's words echoed in my memory. "Sometimes you have to let people face the consequences of their decisions." He had been talking about business strategy at the time, but his wisdom applied perfectly to this situation. Marcus was convinced that experience and institutional knowledge were unnecessary luxuries that modern technology could replace. Perhaps it was time for him to test that theory under real-world conditions. I stepped away from the control panel without correcting Ashley's error or providing any warning about what was about to happen. The professional part of my conscience screamed that I was abandoning my responsibility to protect the company and its workers, but the rational part of my mind recognized that this was no longer my responsibility. Marcus had made it clear that my expertise was unwanted and unnecessary. "Everything looks good," I said calmly, addressing Ashley directly. "You should be able to handle things from here. The system is all yours now." Ashley beamed with confidence and pride. "Thank you for your patience with the transition. I know this must be difficult for you, but I'm excited about bringing some fresh ideas to this department." Marcus seemed relieved that the handover was finally complete without any dramatic scenes or emotional outbursts. He had clearly expected me to be more upset about losing my position, and my calm professionalism probably confused him. Tyler was already typing notes on his tablet, probably calculating the immediate cost savings from my departure. The security guards escorted me toward the exit as I carried a small box containing 10 years' worth of personal items, a few photographs, some technical reference books, and a coffee mug that Harold had given me during my 3rd year with the company. The weight of that small box seemed disproportionate to the magnitude of what I was leaving behind. As we walked through the factory floor, I could see workers trying to gauge my emotional state and understand what my departure meant for their own job security. These were good people who had trusted me to protect their safety and their livelihoods. Leaving them under the supervision of someone as inexperienced as Ashley felt like a betrayal. But I reminded myself that Marcus had made this choice, not me. Dorothy was standing near her workstation, and she caught my eye as we passed. Her expression conveyed both sympathy for my situation and concern about the future. She had worked with Harold for over 15 years and understood the value of experience in managing complex industrial operations. Like me, she probably sensed that changes ahead would not be improvements. Carl was positioned near the main entrance, apparently waiting to say goodbye. As the security guards paused briefly, he approached and spoke quietly. "This is wrong, Gwen. Everybody knows it's wrong. You've kept us safe for 10 years, and they're throwing you away like garbage." His words were both comforting and heartbreaking. The loyalty and respect of people like Carl was worth more than any salary or title, but it couldn't change the reality of what was happening. Marcus had the authority to make these decisions, and my opinion was no longer relevant. "Take care of yourselves," I whispered back to Carl. "Things are going to be different around here." As we reached the main entrance, I paused and looked back at the factory floor one final time. The massive smelting furnaces were operating normally, their intense heat creating the extreme temperatures necessary for steel production. In 15 minutes, those furnaces would begin experiencing power irregularities. In 20 minutes, the molten steel would start cooling and solidifying. By evening, Marcus would understand exactly what he had lost when he decided that my expertise was unnecessary. I walked through the parking lot to my car with a strange sense of liberation mixed with profound sadness. 10 years of my life had been devoted to protecting something that no longer wanted my protection. Marcus was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical experience, and there was nothing I could do to prevent the education he was about to receive. I sat in my car in the Meridian Steel parking lot, unable to drive away just yet. Through the large windows, I could see the normal operations continuing on the factory floor. Workers moved with practiced efficiency around the massive equipment, completely unaware that a crisis was building in the electrical systems that powered their entire world. My phone showed 18 minutes since Ashley had unknowingly initiated the cascade failure that would soon bring everything to a grinding halt. Marcus was visible in his office window, leaning back in his leather chair while talking animatedly on the phone. His gestures suggested he was discussing something exciting, probably the quarterly projections that would show immediate cost savings from my termination. Tyler was seated across from him, nodding approvingly and occasionally consulting his laptop for supporting data. Ashley remained in the electrical control room, studying the monitoring equipment with the confidence of someone who believed that technical school knowledge was sufficient preparation for managing complex industrial systems. She had already made additional adjustments to the power distribution settings, apparently attempting to optimize what she considered inefficient configurations. Each change pushed the electrical grid closer to the critical instability that would trigger catastrophic failure. The first signs of trouble appeared exactly when I expected them. Smelter Bay 2 began showing irregular power fluctuations as the destabilized grid struggled to maintain consistent voltage levels. The massive furnace required precisely controlled electrical input to sustain the 3,000-degree temperatures necessary for steel production. Even minor variations could disrupt the delicate balance between heating elements and cooling systems. Workers on the floor noticed the irregularities immediately. Red warning lights began flashing on several control panels, and the distinctive humming sound of the electrical systems changed pitch slightly. These were subtle indicators that most people would miss, but experienced operators like Dorothy and Carl recognized them as signs of developing problems. Dorothy approached the electrical control room and spoke briefly with Ashley, pointing at the warning displays and expressing concern about the unusual readings. From my distant vantage point, I could see Ashley responding with confident gestures that suggested she was dismissing the warnings as normal variations that didn't require immediate attention. Carl joined the conversation, bringing his decades of maintenance experience to bear on the problem. He was pointing at specific gauges and probably explaining the significance of the warning indicators, but Ashley seemed more interested in consulting her training manuals than listening to institutional knowledge from veteran workers. The power grid instability was cascading exactly as I knew it would. Voltage irregularities in Smelter Bay 2 were creating compensatory adjustments in the other furnaces, which placed additional stress on the distribution system. The electrical load was shifting unpredictably as automated systems tried to maintain stable operations, despite the fundamental configuration errors that Ashley had introduced. Marcus finally noticed the commotion on the factory floor when workers began gathering around the electrical control room. He left his office and walked down to investigate, maintaining the casual demeanor of someone who assumed that minor technical issues were easily resolved. Tyler followed behind him, carrying his laptop and looking slightly concerned about anything that might disrupt their carefully planned operational improvements. Emergency alarms began sounding as the power fluctuations reached critical levels. The automated safety systems were designed to shut down operations before equipment damage could occur, but Ashley was apparently overriding these protocols in an attempt to maintain production. Her training had taught her that alarms were often false positives that could be safely ignored if monitoring data suggested stable conditions. The temperature readings in all 3 smelting furnaces were beginning to drop as the electrical instability disrupted the heating elements. Molten steel required constant energy input to remain liquid at the extreme temperatures necessary for production. As power levels fluctuated, the carefully controlled thermal environment that supported the smelting process was deteriorating rapidly. I checked my phone again 21 minutes since my departure. The point of no return was approaching rapidly. Once the molten steel began cooling below critical thresholds, the entire batch would solidify into a massive metal sculpture that would take weeks to remove and replace. The financial cost would be enormous, but the operational disruption would be even more devastating. Ashley was now frantically adjusting controls as warning displays throughout the electrical system demanded immediate attention. She was clearly overwhelmed by the complexity of the crisis and the speed with which conditions were deteriorating. Her training manuals had not prepared her for this type of systematic failure, and she lacked the intuitive understanding that came from years of hands-on experience. Marcus reached the control room and began demanding explanations for the developing emergency. I could see him gesturing angrily at Ashley while she tried to explain what was happening. Tyler was consulting his laptop, probably searching for troubleshooting procedures that might resolve the crisis without acknowledging the fundamental problem of inadequate expertise. Dorothy and Carl were attempting to provide assistance based on their understanding of the equipment, but Ashley seemed reluctant to accept help from people she considered less qualified than herself. The pride and confidence that had impressed Marcus during her interview were now preventing her from recognizing that she was in over her head and needed immediate support from experienced workers. The situation was deteriorating rapidly as multiple systems began failing simultaneously. Backup generators automatically activated as the main electrical grid became increasingly unstable, but Ashley had not been trained on the proper procedures for managing generator operations during crisis conditions. Her attempts to manually control the power transition were making the situation worse rather than better. Workers throughout the facility were watching the control room with growing anxiety as they realized that something significant was happening. Production lines were shutting down automatically as safety systems responded to the electrical instability. The normal rhythm and sound of the factory were being replaced by alarm bells and the distinctive whining noise of equipment operating under stress. My phone rang with Marcus's contact information displayed on the screen. I watched it ring without answering, curious to see how long it would take him to swallow his pride and ask for help. After 4 rings, the call went to voicemail, and I could see him through the window looking frustrated and angry as he realized that I was not going to respond immediately. The second call came 30 seconds later. This time, I answered on the 5th ring using my most professional and courteous tone. "Hello, Marcus. Is there something I can help you with?" His voice was strained with barely controlled panic. "Gwen, we need you back here immediately. There's some kind of electrical emergency, and Ashley is having trouble getting it under control." I paused for a few seconds before responding, letting him understand that I was no longer obligated to drop everything and rush to solve his problems. "That sounds serious, Marcus. What exactly is the nature of the emergency?" "The power systems are failing and the furnaces are losing temperature," he said, his voice rising with desperation. "Ashley says she can handle it, but nothing she's trying is working. The alarms are going crazy and we might have to shut down production." I could hear Ashley in the background apparently still insisting that she could resolve the crisis without outside assistance. Tyler was also audible, suggesting that they contact the manufacturer's technical support line for guidance on proper procedures. "I understand your concern," I said calmly, "but I'm no longer employed by Meridian Steel. This is Ashley's responsibility now, and I'm sure she'll figure it out. After all, you told me that modern engineers can easily handle anything that comes up." Marcus's tone shifted immediately from panic to pleading. "Gwen, please. Whatever our differences, we can work them out later. Right now, we need your expertise to prevent a complete disaster." Through the window, I could see that conditions were continuing to deteriorate. The molten steel was approaching the critical temperature threshold below which it would begin solidifying. Once that process started, there would be no way to reverse it without weeks of expensive remediation work. "What kind of disaster are we talking about, Marcus?" I asked, maintaining my calm professional tone while watching his company self-destruct through my car window. "The molten steel is cooling too fast," he said desperately. "If we can't restore proper heating, the whole batch will solidify in the furnaces. Ashley says that would cost $55 million to repair." I allowed myself a small smile at the precision of that estimate. Ashley had obviously been consulting the emergency protocols that I had written during my 2nd year, which included detailed cost projections for various types of equipment failures. At least she was learning to appreciate the value of institutional knowledge, even if her recognition came too late to prevent the crisis. "That does sound expensive," I agreed. "Have you considered calling your outside consultants for assistance? I'm sure Tyler's network includes experts who can provide guidance on this type of situation." The frustration in Marcus's voice was palpable as he realized that his cost-cutting measures had eliminated the only person who could save his company from disaster. "Gwen, please stop playing games. We both know that you're the only person who understands these systems well enough to fix this problem. Name your price." I let Marcus's desperate phone call go to voicemail as I watched chaos unfold through the factory windows. The alarms were now clearly audible even from the parking lot, and emergency lights were flashing throughout the facility. Workers were evacuating non-essential areas as safety protocols activated automatically, and I could see Ashley frantically consulting multiple technical manuals while surrounded by warning displays demanding immediate attention. After 15 minutes of watching his company spiral toward disaster, I decided to answer Marcus's 5th phone call. His voice was raw with panic and barely controlled desperation when I finally picked up. "Gwen, thank God you answered. The situation is getting worse by the minute. We're looking at complete system failure and the molten steel is approaching critical cooling temperatures. Please, I'm begging you to come back and help us." I paused thoughtfully before responding. "Marcus, I appreciate your call, but as you made very clear this morning, I'm no longer an employee of Meridian Steel. This is Ashley's responsibility now, and I have complete confidence in her ability to handle the situation using modern engineering principles." "Gwen, please don't do this," he pleaded. "Whatever mistakes I made, we can discuss them later. Right now, hundreds of jobs are at stake, and we're facing potential bankruptcy if we can't resolve this crisis. His mention of the workers' welfare struck a chord with me. Despite my anger at Marcus and Tyler, I genuinely cared about the people whose livelihoods depended on Meridian Steel's continued operation. Dorothy, Carl, and hundreds of other employees didn't deserve to suffer because of management's arrogance and stupidity. If I were to consider returning, I said slowly, what exactly would you be offering? Marcus didn't hesitate. Anything you want. Name your terms and we'll make it work. I had thought carefully about this moment during the past half hour of watching his company self-destruct. First, I want my position back with a 50% salary increase and a written 5-year contract. Second, Tyler is fired immediately and permanently banned from company property. Third, Ashley is terminated, and I have complete authority over hiring her replacement. Fourth, I want written apology letters to every employee who was laid off with offers to return at their previous salaries plus 10% increases. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted nearly 30 seconds. I could hear urgent conversations in the background as Marcus consulted with Tyler and other advisors about my demands. Done, Marcus said finally. Everything you've asked for is agreed to. Now please get back here immediately. I drove slowly back to the factory entrance, taking my time while Marcus and Ashley continued their futile attempts to resolve the crisis without my expertise. By the time I reached the electrical control room, the situation was approaching the point where permanent damage would be unavoidable. Ashley was near tears, overwhelmed by the complexity of managing multiple simultaneous system failures. Tyler was frantically calling technical support lines while Marcus paced behind them, occasionally shouting instructions that revealed his complete ignorance about electrical systems. Step away from the controls, I said firmly as I entered the room. Ashley looked relieved to surrender responsibility while Tyler glared at me with obvious resentment about his impending termination. I quickly assessed the status of all systems, noting the specific configuration errors that had created the cascade failure. Ashley's attempts to correct the problems had actually made them worse, but the situation was still recoverable if I acted quickly and systematically. Working with practiced efficiency, I began reversing the dangerous settings that Ashley had implemented. My fingers moved across the control panel with the muscle memory developed through years of experience, each adjustment designed to gradually restore stability without creating additional stress on the overloaded systems. Dorothy, I need you to coordinate with Carl on the backup generator transitions. I called out to the veteran supervisor who had been watching anxiously from the doorway. Carl, check the transformer cooling systems and report any irregularities immediately. The veteran workers responded, instantly relieved to be working with someone who understood both the technical requirements and the human dynamics of crisis management. Their expertise complemented mine perfectly, and within minutes we had stabilized the electrical grid and begun restoring proper heating to the smelting furnaces. The molten steel temperatures gradually returned to normal ranges as consistent power flow was reestablished. Emergency alarms stopped sounding, warning lights returned to normal status, and the familiar rhythm of productive operations resumed throughout the facility. Marcus watched the recovery process with obvious amazement and growing respect for the expertise he had tried to eliminate. How did you know exactly what to do? He asked quietly. 10 years of experience, I replied simply. The same experience you decided was unnecessary this morning. When the crisis was fully resolved and normal operations restored, Marcus called an emergency meeting with the entire management team and board of directors. He publicly acknowledged that his decision to terminate me had been a catastrophic mistake, and that only my expertise had prevented bankruptcy-level losses. Tyler was escorted from the building by the same security guards who had removed me hours earlier. Ashley submitted her resignation and returned to academic study, acknowledging that she wasn't ready for the responsibilities of managing complex industrial systems. The board of directors offered me the position of chief operations officer with a significant equity stake in the company. My new role included authority over all technical operations and protection against future management decisions that could compromise safety or efficiency. 6 months later, I visited Harold at his memory care facility to share news of the changes at Meridian Steel. During one of his clearer moments, he smiled with pride as I described how the company had returned to the values and principles he had established. "You protected what we built together," he said softly. "I knew you would find a way." Under my leadership, Meridian Steel became more profitable than ever, while also treating employees with the dignity and respect they deserved. We implemented comprehensive training programs that preserved institutional knowledge invested in equipment upgrades that improved both safety and efficiency and created a culture where experience was valued alongside innovation. Marcus proved surprisingly capable of learning from his mistakes. He apologized personally to every laid-off employee and worked hard to rebuild the trust and respect that his father had earned over decades. While he retained ownership of the company, he deferred to my expertise on all operational matters and focused his efforts on strategic planning and customer relationships. 1 year after the crisis, Meridian Steel received industry recognition for operational excellence and worker safety. Our success story was featured in manufacturing publications as an example of how respecting experienced workers and institutional knowledge could drive both profitability and employee satisfaction. The lesson I learned was that sometimes standing up for yourself means allowing others to face the natural consequences of their poor decisions. True expertise cannot be replaced by arrogance or eliminated through cost-cutting measures. When people dismiss the value of experience and institutional knowledge, they inevitably discover their mistake when crisis tests their assumptions. My experience taught me that loyalty and dedication should never be taken for granted, but also that competence and integrity ultimately prevail over short-sighted management practices. The most satisfying aspect of my vindication was not personal revenge, but the knowledge that hundreds of families could continue depending on stable employment at a company that valued their contributions. Have you ever been in a situation where someone dismissed your expertise or experience only to later realize they needed exactly what they had rejected? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about times when you had to stand up for your professional worth. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more true stories about workplace justice and personal triumph. Share this with anyone who's ever felt undervalued at work, and remember that your knowledge and experience have real value that can't be replaced by spreadsheets and cost-cutting measures. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the best way to prove your worth is to let others discover it the hard way.